let's go to quantum biology, another really, really cool field. Firstly, what is quantum biology, and maybe what is in your view the most interesting example of quantum mechanics in a biological system?
Well, it was long thought that to see quantum mechanical effects like superposition, we generally have to they're very, you could think of them as very delicate. So you have to cool, an atom down, or isolate it from its surroundings, or stop it interacting with its surroundings in a way that spreads out that quantumness through entanglement, and then it's kind of lost. So yeah, most quantum phenomena have to be they have to be sort of seen in systems that are very well isolated and often very, very cold. You have to do that in most quantum computers. So people figured, well, it's unlikely that effects like that are going to be relevant to biology, which is warm and wet, and noisy, and everything is sort of buzzing around. But some years ago, I guess it was really sort of a couple of decades ago, that this idea started to become of wide interest, that people started to say, well, that may not be so. There were some biological systems where it looked possible that quantum mechanics was playing some sort of role. One of them was in photosynthesis, where it seemed that there was a way in which when you get a plant pigment that absorbs light, it then has to transfer that energy into other molecules, and that's the start of the process of photosynthesis, where that energy is ultimately sort of passed down this chain of molecules, and it's used to conduct some chemical reaction, basically to pump protons somewhere. So it looked as though these experiments looking at that process of transfer of the absorbed energy of the light to other molecules, it looked like that was somehow making use of quantum effects in a way that it seemed to be. It looked as though there was a sort of superposition of states, where instead of just following a particular sort of path, it seemed as though the energy was being sort of transferred in a wave-like way that sort of felt all the different paths, like a superposition of different trajectories it could take, and that was somehow making that process more efficient. So that was one of the areas that people started to think, well, maybe there are quantum effects in biology. Another was that there's this idea that in some birds that are sensitive to the Earth's magnetic field and use it to navigate, and the European robin is one of these, that how it does this, where it gets its magnetic field sensitivity from, is not fully understood. It seems to be related to particular proteins in the brain of the robin that seem to be sort of magnetically sensitive. But the idea was that basically there were uncharged, unpaired electrons, so free radicals, they're called, in these molecules that are sensitive to the magnetic field, but that they come in pairs that were quantum mechanically entangled. And so somehow it was that entanglement, that sensitivity of the two electrons in these free radicals to the state that each other was in. It was that was somehow being involved in this sort of magnetoreception, this sort of sensitivity to magnetic fields. So, there were one or two ideas like that. Other people were suggesting that a process called quantum tunneling, where a particle seems to be able to get over an energy barrier, or it actually sort of seems to tunnel through the barrier, even though it doesn't have enough energy, sort of classically speaking, to get past the barrier. It sort of tunnels through. Some people thought that process was also happening in biology. All of those systems have been looked at in detail. And I have to say, I mean, I was really interested. I still am interested in quantum biology, but I have to say it's slightly gone off the boil, I think, in that the closer we've looked at some of those systems, like the photosynthesis one, the less it looked like it was real quantum mechanical superposition that was involved in that transfer of energy. With the magnetoreception of the robin and other birds, it seems like it might be possible that something like entanglement is going on, but it's not too clear whether it's really that or whether it's just some classical chemical effect. The one area in biology where I think it is well established that quantum mechanical effects are real is in that there are many biochemical reactions that involve a protein of some sort, an enzyme of some sort, helping a hydrogen ion to move from one place to another. Sometimes the enzyme might sort of take the hydrogen ion, or it might transfer it somewhere else, or it might just catalyze that sort of movement. And the hydrogen ion is basically a single proton. It's a very, very light particle. And because it's so light, it seems at least conceivable that this quantum mechanical effect of tunneling might even still happen at room temperature in the messy, the warm messiness of biology. And in fact, it seems there's now very strong evidence that that really does happen. And in some ways, it's no surprise that you get quantum tunneling in processes like that, because you see them in other chemical reactions as well. There's nothing special about biology that allows that to happen. The key thing about it is that when you get tunneling, it allows the proton to sort of hop from one place to another more efficiently, because it can sort of get through this barrier than you would expect if you were just thinking about it as a classical process. So, it seems to improve the efficiency of proton transfer. So, that does seem to be a kind of version of quantum biology. The big question is whether nature evolution really has been able to take advantage of that process and has somehow sort of geared these proton transfer enzymes in a way that allows them to take advantage of quantum tunneling, or whether it's just something that happens because it happens, in chemical reactions of this sort. So whether there's any adaptive advantage to those quantum effects is still an open question. And as far as I can see, there's no proof that it is. So it may be just a sort of epiphenomenon of biology rather than something, rather than evolution making use of quantum mechanics.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. I just spoke to John Joe McFadden on the podcast, who is one of the co-authors of Life on the Edge, which was one of those first sort of big popular science books on quantum biology, and those examples that you gave there were also in the book, and it blew my mind that could be possible, especially the bird migration. Explain to me exactly how the process works where they first get evidence that it might be a quantum phenomena. Does that kind of emerge from the maths? Are you just doing maths on paper, kind of figuring out, okay, the photon, it's captured by the chloroplast, and then you kind of keep doing the maths and eventually you get something that looks quantum? I'm not really clear on how you figure out if a system in biology is using quantum mechanics. Is that a mathematical emerging thing that you see?
It really depends on the phenomenon you're looking at.
Okay.
And I mean, I'm certainly not expert in the details of how they do it, but I know that in the photosynthetic example, it came about from spectroscopy experiments, where they were able to look, in great detail and very fast at how that energy transfer was working. And, how the energy was sort of hopping in packets, if you like, between this molecule and that molecule. And, it was using this technique of spectroscopy, where you're basically using now these days lasers to sort of shine light and see how that sort of affects the process, or to see how the light is absorbed or re-emitted. And that tells you something about how the process is happening, how the energy transfer is happening.
Right.
Whereas for example, looking for tunneling of hydrogen ions, there it's very much about looking to see whether, if you change the hydrogen ion for a deuterium ion, which is an isotope of hydrogen that has a neutron as well as a proton, that makes it twice as heavy as a normal hydrogen ion. If you change the hydrogen ion for a deuterium ion, chemically it's no different. But because it's twice as massive, that is predicted to change the tunneling rates in a particular way, because the tunneling rate should be very sensitive to the mass. And so you can look to see what difference it makes to the kinetics, the rate at which those reactions happen. And from that, you can figure out if there's tunneling happening or not.
Very cool. I wasn't sure how that worked at all. I wasn't sure how inconclusive it was either. I mean, I should have just assumed. I mean, it's quantum mechanics, so it's all inconclusive. But I didn't know exactly how you're getting those signals that within the system it looks quantum. I wasn't really sure if that just emerged from the maths, or was it a specific thing that you discover, and then it kind of seems more quantum than classical, or exactly how you deduced from that if the system was using quantum mechanics. So that's cleared up something for me.
Right. Yeah. I mean, as I said, generally it comes from experiments, and it comes from figuring out what the experiment should show if this is purely a classical process or if
Yes.
it's somehow a quantum process.
Right, because both theories sort of make predictions about how the system should operate and change over time.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
Very cool. What do you think about the theories of consciousness that are the quantum theories of consciousness, I should say, set out by Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff? Are you sort of a believer in these? What do you think? What do you think about those ideas?
I don't believe them. I'm afraid, as simple as that, because I have seen no evidence whatsoever that persuades me that they should have anything to that quantum effects should have anything to do with with cognition. The idea generally seems to revolve around these structures, these protein filaments called microtubules that exist in cells, including neurons. And the idea is that somehow there are quantum effects within these microtubules. And some say they're quantum effects that involve the water molecules around the microtubules, and that somehow those are involved, and that somehow these get translated into the way that the neurons fire or something. And I'm not saying that, I don't think I'm saying that entirely out of ignorance. I think I'm partly at least saying it because I don't think those details are ever really spelled out. How you get from something quantum, a sort of quantum, vibration happening in a microtubule or in the water around it, to something that affects the way our brains work and the consciousness of an event. I have never seen that spelt out clearly. I don't think
Yeah,
Roger Penrose has ever. I don't think either of them has really done that.
yeah,
So there are sort of vague plausibility arguments for how the two are connected, but I've never seen that. So that alone makes me feel I don't think it's a fully worked out idea. But also I have seen no evidence that there are any sorts of quantum effects even happening in microtubules. There's no reason to suspect that, and we would suspect, again, because of the warm wetness of biology, in a case like that where these are, relatively speaking, pretty sort of massive molecular things. You wouldn't expect quantum effects to register there, and we haven't seen any. So.
right.
Yeah, I just see no experimental reason and no theoretical reason either to imagine that the two are related.
Right. I constantly see Stuart Hameroff on X commenting on all of these consciousness threads with extreme confidence and using more incomprehensible language that he should win an award for the most complicated sentences he's constructing in these. And there's just so many phrases that I just have absolutely no idea what he's talking about. And he speaks with such confidence on the idea. I'd love to talk to him directly Roger Penrose as well, just directly, because I've never really understood it either. I actually gave a presentation on it in college, but that doesn't mean I understood what the hell I was talking about.
I don't think many people, if anyone, does. I mean, I've had some interactions with Stuart, and he's very assertive about his views, but in a way that I'm afraid simply hasn't persuaded me that there's anything in it.
The Giant Shoulder mission is to explore radical ideas in biology, neuroscience, and consciousness, and elevate those stories to the highest possible level while keeping them accessible to everyone. If this interests you and you want to support independent science, then please consider subscribing to the Clips channel. Check out our 26 Neuroscience book. You can download it for free